All right. Let's see. Apparently I'm live. The thingamajiggies are saying I'm live. So I must be live. Let me just write something down here. All right. How is everybody doing? I apologize for not being more active. You know, I'm up here at Studio B, and I could have sworn when I started off this week, or actually I came up here, it would have been Sunday, I thought I would do more in terms of, video content, YouTubery and such. As you may or may not have noticed, that didn't happen, which is, it's okay. It's all right. I wanted to do better. I find, especially when I'm here by myself, I don't know, I find it very relaxing. I tend to maybe relax a little bit too much in terms of streaming, doing stuff like that. It's weird. I don't necessarily feel as driven as I do when I'm usually at home for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because I feel like I'm more in vacation mode when I'm up here. I don't know. I did actually get a lot done in terms of doing stuff for myself and for things I've been working on. Those won't really manifest themselves to the greater world for a little bit. I did post this yesterday. I printed out my my player's guide. Well, I finished the booklet, and I printed a test printing up here, and I'm going to be doing some printing. So part of the reason I'm doing this is I'm now equipped to print out some things, do some printed materials. I'm still sorting some of it out, and I'm terrible at the page trimming. Stories for another day. Hey, Krister. Hey, Croco. Those are coming, but these are things that won't be noticed, seen, whatnot for a bit, but they're coming. And so I will, once I can kind of, I got a few more things to print, and I can get the workflow pretty well, then I'll be able to print some. I'll bring them to cons. I'll make some available online, and so on and so forth. So I know people have asked me for printed stuff, and especially with tariffs and who knows what's going on, I thought, maybe I'll just try printing them myself. And so I'm now equipped at least to do it on a very basic level. If I was printing out huge, not quantities or just size books, it probably wouldn't work. But for smaller things, it should be good. I should be pretty good to go. I mean, hopefully it's a good problem. If I can get to the problem where I have to, it's not growing as fast or whatever, that would be awesome. But for the moment, there'll be more about that down the line. So I was getting into some discussions on a Discord the other day, and someone was mentioning kind of the GM stuff and just Dungeon World came up in terms of its GM advice. And then what also came up was the Blorb, which I'd heard people, it almost kind of has become a meme in some of the places I hang out on about the Blorb Principles and whatnot, but I'd never actually read the Blorb Principles. And the Blorb document, which I think I forgot to put in the show notes for it now, I'll post this in the chat. It's unclear to me when this was dated, so I don't know if it's old or new or new-ish. I'm just typing this in, but I thought it might be fun today. There we go. I will pin that for right now. Fun today to kind of go through both of those. And one, so Blorb is definitely would be in your kind of OSR side of the street, and Dungeon World is not totally foreign. So if you're not familiar, Apocalypse World was the first, powered by the Apocalypse, hence that's what the A in PBTA, or the Apocalypse in Powered by the Apocalypse, is from Apocalypse World. And then I believe that was the first one. Then they made Dungeon World, which was an attempt to use the Powered by the Apocalypse system to run dungeons, at least not in the OSR principles, but kind of like a lot of folks were doing as the OSR movement, these moves were taking off, was saying, what was my experience playing this stuff when I was a kid or as a younger person or whatever, my memory, and let me see, can I recreate that? And sometimes it was like, well, I can recreate it by just playing BX, or I can recreate it by playing OD&D or second edition or AD&D or whatever. Well, there were some other folks that said, well, you know what, I want to use these other rules or my own rules or something else in my devising, but I want to capture either that experience that I had, or maybe the experience that I always wanted, what I would maybe the ideal to me, the author's experience of D&D. So you get these different games that come out that would be looking at D&D, not necessarily the system, but that experience of playing in different ways and looking at, well, what would I like that experience to be? And there's a lot of games that came out, and as Dungeon World was maybe one of the first ones. And kind of, it was very, I don't know what the standing is now with Dungeon World, but I feel like it's a classic in this realm, if you will. And Croco says they read the Blorb article, and it's got this DM advice section. So I thought we would read it, discuss it. Maybe we'll discuss it afterwards, or I wanted to read the Blorb. And part of me was thinking that they may not be, because you might think, well, PBTA, which is sort of like, the story game, and OSR are, fairly separate. And so you might expect that in this kind of seminal story game type that's taking on dungeons, so it's not like we're picking Monsters of the Week or something and throwing it in there and saying, oh, no, this is to play kind of dungeon, looking at the same sort of game as what the Blorb is asking us to play, but from a different way. So you might expect them to be really different advice, but I'm curious. I kind of glanced through the Blorb. I've read Dungeon World ages ago. So let me not waste any more time in this prologue. Let me just get down to it. So this is from Dungeon World. How to GM. When you sit down at the table as a GM, you do these things. Describe the situation, follow the rules, make moves, exploit your prep. And just to say here, moves that what Dungeon World, or what Powered by the Apocalypse tries to do, is categorize kind of the things you would do as a GM into different things they call moves. And so something would happen, the players do something, and then you would make a move. The idea being not that you as a GM, and I forget the list of moves, but and players have moves also. That's, it's kind of like their word for action, but they all fall into they try to put them in different buckets. So as one of the ones as a player would be defying danger, which could be any way you are defying danger. And you're not supposed to say, I am defying danger. You're supposed to say what you're doing, and then the GM might say, oh, I think you're defying danger, so this. That's kind of how it's supposed to work. So the GM's got moves, the players got moves. The players have it easy. They just say what their characters say, think, and do. You have it a bit harder. You have to say everything else. What does that entail? First and foremost, you describe the immediate situation around the players at all times. This is how you start a session, how you get things rolling after a snack break, get back on track after a great joke. Tell them what the situation is in concrete terms. Use details and senses to draw them in. All right, just taking I should have done this before I started, but this is Mandarin Orange Seltzer from the supermarket for the working man. Okay. Use detail and senses to draw them in. The situation isn't just an orc charging you, it's an orc painted in blood, swinging a hammer and yelling bloody murder. You can leverage a lack of information too, the sound of clattering armor and shuffling feet, for instance. This doesn't sound really any different, right? And I think why this kind of advice gets resurfaced from time to time is because it is kind of generally good. I don't think anyone could argue with this part of it of, oh, yeah, we should describe the situation. And we should be doing things like people often say, use all the five senses. Don't just say the orcs of the whatever tribe, describe them. If they're orcs of a certain group and they've got certain, they use certain symbols where you can describe all that stuff, and the players will go, oh, that's the orcs of the so-and-so group, right? The situation around them is rarely, quote, everything's great, nothing to worry about, unquote. They're adventurers going on adventures. Give them something to react to. When you describe the situation, always end with, what do you do? Dungeon World's about action and adventure. Portray a situation that demands a response. From the get-go, make sure to follow the rules. This means your GM rules, sure, but also keep an eye on the players' moves. It's everyone's responsibility to watch for when a move has been triggered, including you. And this is just going back to those moves, because there's a lot about moves and what those moves entail. It is kind of important, and I'm just saying this from only having read Dungeon World a while back and having looked a little bit, right? You because the moves have responses, it is important to know when they're triggering, which it's really similar to, it's really would be the same as looking out as a GM as to what we want to require a roll for versus what not, right? What is to use kind of my parlance in troop, like what is a challenge? Like what is it that you have to actually, okay, we have to deal with this versus what you're just kind of rolling through, and it's like a freebie. Part of the following rules is making moves. Your moves are different than player moves, and we'll describe them in detail in a bit. I'm not going to worry about moves. But remember, these are just these kind of, again, these sort of buckets that contain the things as a GM should be doing. Your moves are specific things you can do to change the flow of the game. In all of these things, exploit your prep. At times, you'll know something the players don't know. Yeah. At times, you'll know something the players don't yet know. You can use that knowledge to help you make moves. Maybe the wizard tries to cast a spell and draws unwanted attention. They don't know that the attention that just fell on them was the ominous gaze of a demon waiting 2 levels below, but you do. Again, I think this is really base stuff, right? Exploit your prep. Yeah, the wizard doesn't know if they cast a spell here and make a lot of noise, that there's a Balrog that's a room down that's like, oh, there's a spell going off, right? But they do. So, exploit your prep, I think, is another, I feel like that would be a pretty fundamental rule. Agenda. Your agenda makes up the things you aim to do at all times while GMing a game of Dungeon World. Portray a fantastic world, fill the characters' lives with adventure, play to find out what happens. Again, like this is really the kind of standard core stuff, right? I think that we often say that about games in the OSR space, that we want to play to find out what happens. We're not following a storyline. We're not following someone's plot, right? We want to play to find out what happens. Ian asks, who are we dueling? This is ourselves, Ian. It's that episode where we must face our own mirrored identities. Everything you say and do at the table, and away from the table too, exists to accomplish these 3 goals and no others. Things that aren't on this list aren't your goals. You're not trying to beat the players or test their ability to solve complex traps. You're not here to give the players a chance to explore your finely crafted setting. You're not trying to kill the players, though monsters might be. You're most certainly not here to tell everyone a planned out story. Again, I feel like this stuff falls right in line with the kind of advice you would see in any kind of OSR-ish tome. Your first agenda is to portray a fantastic world. Dungeon World is all about guts, guile, and bravery against darkness and doom. It's about characters who have decided to take up a life of adventure in the hopes of some glorious reward. It's your job to participate in that by showing the players a world in which their characters can find that adventure. Without the player characters, the world would fall into chaos or destruction. It might still, even with them. It's up to you to portray the fantastic elements of that world. Show the players the wonders of the world they're in and encourage them to react to it. Filling the characters' lives with adventure means working with the players to create a world that's engaging and dynamic. Adventurers are always caught up in some world-threatening danger or another. Encourage and foster that kind of action in the game. Dungeon World adventures never presume player actions. A Dungeon World adventure portrays a setting in motion, someplace significant with creatures big and small pursuing their own goals. As the players come into conflict with that setting and its denizens, action is inevitable. You'll honestly portray the repercussions of that action. Like I said, I don't know. I could probably just keep saying this a bunch of times, but I think if you were to take this out of Dungeon World and stick it into a Matt Finch thing, it wouldn't feel what the Principia Apocrypha or something similar. It wouldn't feel out of place, right? We're not assuming any actions. We're setting up a scenario. We're putting people in their own actions, and we're trying to honestly portray the repercussions of things that go on. Croco says that it's missing a bit of actionable advice in there. I don't know that I agree with that. It's by actionable because it's not giving you a specific problem. It's not saying to fix problem A, do thing A. It's kind of giving you this general thing. So I don't know if it needs to be particularly actionable, like do this one thing, because there is no one thing, but I feel like they are giving you things to do, though, yeah, they are very broad, but they are things to do. Okay, Dungeon World. Okay, I got that part. Let's see. This is how, but we'll keep going because I think there are some, it gives you some more concrete if you're looking for things that are less broad. This is how you play to find out what happens. You're sharing in the fun of finding out how the characters react to and change the world you're portraying. You're all participants in a great adventure that's unfolding. So really, don't plan too hard. The rules of the game will fight you. It's fun to see how things unfold. Trust us. I think that's all good. Now we get down to the principles. Maybe, Croco, you'll find these more to your liking. Draw maps, leave blanks. Address the characters, not the players. Embrace the fantastic. Make a move that follows. Never speak the name of your move. This would be, again, like saying something like I defy danger to use one of their moves, or if a player were to say, I want to roll to investigate, you would say no, or ideally you would say no, tell me what you're doing, and I will tell you whether that's investigation or whether it's something else or blah, 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 right? So it's pretty much the same thing here. It's like, yes, you may have a skill called observe or something, but you should be telling me what your character is doing that indicates that they are observing. Let's see. Give every monster life, name every person, ask questions and use the answers, be a fan of the characters, think dangerous, begin and end with the fiction, think off screen too. And we'll go through these so we can get a little bit more context into what they mean. Draw maps, leave blanks. Dungeon World exists mostly in the imagination of the people playing it. Maps help everyone stay on the same page. You want to always be drawing them yourself, but anytime there's a new location described, make sure it gets added to a map. When you draw a map, don't try to make it complete. Leave room for the unknown. As you play, you'll get more ideas, and the players will give you inspiration to work with. Let the maps expand and change. I mean, I think people talk about this all the time, right? When you're setting up your adventure, when you're drawing things, like leave yourself spaces. Leave, like I say, leave blanks on the map so that you can fill things in as you go. You don't need to figure everything out from the jump, and it's probably better that you don't. Address the characters, not the players. Addressing the characters, not the players, means that you don't say, Tony, is Dunwick doing something about that white? Instead, you say, Dunwick, what are you doing about the white? Speaking this way keeps the game focused on the fiction and not on the table. It's important to the flow of the game, too. If you talk to the players, you may leave out details that are important to what moves the characters make. Since moves are always based on the actions of the character, you need to think about what's happening in terms of those characters, not the players portraying them. I'm a little bit more ambivalent on this, but I think a lot of people would say, yeah, that if you can stay in character and talk in the characters, then that's better. I've had fun games working either way, so I don't know if it's one that bothers me, but it's not bad advice by any stretch. Embrace the fantastic. Magic, strange vistas, gods, demons, and abominations. The world is full of mystery and magic. Embrace that in your prep and play. Think about, quote unquote, the fantastic on various scales. Think about floating cities or islands crafted from the corpse of a god. Think about village wise men and their spirit familiars, or the statue that the local bandits touch to give them luck. The characters are interesting people empowered by their gods, their skill in arms, or by mystical training. The world should be just as engaging. And of course, you can moderate that if you're playing a really gritty, down-to-earth campaign. Then, yeah, maybe you want to have floating cities. But I think thinking about what makes this world interesting, keeping your world engaging, again, I think is solid. Make a move that follows. When you make a move, what you're actually doing is taking an element of the fiction and bringing it to bear against the characters. Your move should always follow from the fiction. They help you focus on one aspect of the current situation and do something interesting with it. What's going on? What move makes sense here? I think maybe the thing to take from that is that you should be looking at the context to whatever you're planning. And I think one that comes to mind is if you have a situation where the party does something wrong. Let's say they're in the throne room and they fart and don't excuse themselves, and the GM is, has everybody outraged, and they'll say something like, and now the guards have got you, the guards have captured you. And you might think, well, okay, yes, they're in the throne room, so they're probably guards, but it doesn't follow the fiction because the guards the party wasn't in that situation. They were something else. So you should think about maybe the card, not jumping the gun and saying, well, the guards just capture you. Well, where were the guards? What do the guards do? What is the situation? What can I play with? So you say, oh my gosh, this has to be responded to. Fine. So you start moving the pieces, but you got to move the pieces based on where they were, right? In the other situation, when the wizard casts a spell and there's a Balrog two rooms away, the Balrog probably doesn't know exactly where the wizard is who cast the spell. I mean, in your game, maybe they do, but let's just say they just hear the noise, and like anybody hearing noise, it's like, okay, I know it's near, but I don't know exactly where it is. So maybe the Balrog enters the hallway, but then it should take some time for the Balrog to maybe move one way down the hallway or the other, and they shouldn't probably not just all of a sudden be in front of the wizard like, aha, you cast a spell. If the context is there that Balrogs have that ability and can do all that, then yeah, sure, that might happen. Otherwise, you should probably use the context to say, okay, the Balrog responds because the Balrog is there, but the Balrog also has to do things otherwise, or use the pieces that are on the board. Look at the context, basically. Hey, Brian Smith. Brian says you have to telegraph the flatulence guard before they strike, like a trap in a dungeon. That would be good if there was a flatulence guard and he's carrying a little candle, and if the candle like flares, then all of a sudden he's on guard. A flatulence has happened here. Never speak the name of your move. There's no quicker way to ruin the consistency of Dungeon World than to tell the players what move you're making. Your moves are prompts to you, not things you say directly. You never show the players that you're picking a move from a list. You know the reason the slavers dragged off Omar was because you made the put someone in a spot move, but you show it to the players as a straightforward outcome of their actions, since it is. Same thing. Same thing as we see in when we talk about skills and when players will try to, that kind of playing off their sheet versus playing, right? You're using the moves because the moves are these nice buckets that just give you some structure mechanically to what you're doing, but the fiction should be the fiction. The fiction shouldn't be you saying, I do this thing. It should be what's happening in the fiction. Ian says, unless you're playing in an anime-themed game and you need to shout out your move every time you use it. I don't think that's but I think that's an actual fictional. Well, I don't know what anime you're talking about, but I just watched Frieren, which actually is really cool. Somebody commented to me on a video, and I checked it out, and then I binged watched it, and it was actually quite good. And I'll probably talk something about it in a separate video. But anyway, they yell out the spells they're casting, but those are in fiction because these spells are known. And one of them is called Zoltrak, which is this kind of offensive, this major. It's like this standard offensive spell. So they may say Zoltrak, and then they'll do it. But that's a thing in the world. It's not. I don't even know what the D&D version of it would be, but they're not calling out. I don't know. They're not. What would be one? They're not saying like spot hidden or something. Spot hidden. No, that kind of thing. Oh, Ian, you saw Frieren. You saw. Did you read? I kind of want to go and read because I know it's based on some kind of manga. I think I'll probably want to go read the manga, but if it's not super expensive, hard to find. But yeah, the anime was good. I recommend. It's definitely. They did a lot of things really well. I kind of wish. I don't want to get on a Frieren tangent because I will do something on it, but I kind of wish they didn't Dragon Ball Z everything. And I don't know what the phrase would be, but I feel like it just, for me, it's Dragon Ball Z when just everything is just supersized. So, she's casting the spell, and it's a standard offensive magic. It's an in-game. They talk about this. Like there's like standard magic, and then there's it's pretty cool. They have standard magic, they have folk magic, and there's different things. But, this Zoltrak standard magic spell. So it's not even a big deal. Maybe it would be akin to, say, a magic missile type spell. And the way this thing rips apart the countryside and just obliterates stuff, it's just you just wonder how could the landscape survive a bunch of wizards out there casting the Zoltrak. It would just be nothing but a scarred land. And to me, I always equate that to Dragon Ball Z. Like they couldn't just fight; they have to blow up planets. I don't know. It's just everything is just creating just like immense destruction. Ian says, but she's the best at casting it. And that's not just her, Ian. I'm not even talking about just Frieren casting Zoltrak, because her apprentice casts Zoltrak. It gets cast a bunch. The demon, who I guess was it his spell originally? Was his name Zoltrak? Casts it, and granted his is, but it's like all the spells are like that. They're never just like I don't know, like what we consider a normal D&D spell. It all feels like they turned all the dials to 11. And it's just unfortunate because it's it's unfortunate only because the person who sent me Frieren said, this is how younger generations see kind of fantasy stuff. And I don't know if that's true. I don't know if there's one monolithic or even close to monolithic view that we could have, but if folks from that then go to play any kind of fantasy game, unless it's some amped up, I guess, anime game, then it's not going to feel as exciting. Even Fireball is not going to feel nearly as potent as Zoltrak. And it would be hard if it did, because you'd just be destroying everything all the time. Ian asked if I got to the Mage Academy trials. I did. I saw the whole thing. I did, right? But and their stuff is different, Ian, because they're mostly using their own. There seems to be this thing of having their own magic versus the sort of standard magic that Frieren uses a lot. But I think even then, when they use those spells, they're pretty nasty. I mean, nobody's got any kind of small magic. I mean, I won't spoil it. Maybe there's one you could say, well, that one's kind of small, though it's it's like that quote. Like, it may be small, but still, be fierce. But yeah, I watched the whole thing. I hope they're going to do more of it. It seems like the end of the show says like more's coming, but you never know. Anyway, all right, off of Freerun. We'll do a video, or maybe we could do a thing on a stream on Freerun, because it is worth digging into a bit. Okay, give every monster life. Monsters are fantastic creatures with their own motivations, simple or complex. Give each monster details that bring it to life, smells, sights, sounds. Give each one enough to make it real, but don't cry when it gets beat up or overthrown. That's what player characters do. Yes, definitely don't cry. But I agree also, right? I think a solid advice again. Name every person. Anyone that the players speak with has a name. They probably have a personality and some goals or opinions too, but you can figure that out as you go. Start with a name, the rest can flow from there. I think that's solid advice. I mean, I know I've been in games and I've probably fallen into that myself, where it's just like the guy. But yeah, I mean, I think the extent that you can give them a name, it's good. I know some people might even feel like don't give them a name, because then the players will think they're more important than they are. Because if you just call the guy like Tavern, oh, he's just a tavern goer, then they'll know he's background. But if you say that's Jeff, suddenly the player's like, ooh, what about Jeff? But I'm all right with that. Giving him names is good. Brian says he's not naming their gelatinous cubes. You should. The gelatinous cubes actually should have really cool names. But nobody speaks cubish or cubic, so they never hear them. And perhaps they're three-dimensional names? Ooh. Ask questions and use the answers. Part of playing to find out what happens is explicitly not knowing everything and being curious. If you don't know something or you don't have an idea, ask the players and use what they say. The easiest question to use is, what do you do? Whenever you make a move, end with, what do you do? You don't even have to ask the person you made the move against to take that chance to shift the focus elsewhere. Wrath's spell is torn apart with a flick of the mage's wand. Finnegan, that spell was aiding you. What are you doing now that it's gone? Yeah, and I think that's solid advice. Be a fan of the characters. Think of the player characters as protagonists in a story you might see on TV. Cheer for their victories and lament their defeats. You're not here to push them in any particular direction, merely to participate in fiction that features them and their action. So actually, I kind of like the way this is written, because I'm usually not a fan of be a fan of the characters, because that usually is a prologue to the like rule of cool stuff, which I'm torn on. I know I'm not anti rule of cool, but I feel like there's been, and I've talked about this in the past, there's been this tendency to be like, oh, rule of cool, so you just let me do whatever I want, bro. And I'm like, no. And you always see as a response, it's like, dude, you should be a fan of my character. And that's not what it's about. That's where the kind of fairness comes in. Fairness to me is, yeah, I am a fan. I want you to do well. I want you to succeed, but I'm not going to help you succeed. I'm the referee, like a referee to game. I might be reffing a game that's my hometown team, but I'm going to call it down the middle. I want them to win. I want them to win because they won, not because I fudged a call one way or another. But the idea that, as they say here, you're not here to push them in particular direction. So you're their fan, but you're not trying to help them, push them towards success, and you're not trying to hold them down to failure. But you're kind of there. I think that where I appreciate the way they say here is it's kind of like they're the show, which I think is true, right? It's about the player characters and their adventures. Sometimes as GMs, we can get caught up in like thinking this is about us or about our world, but it's about them. The player characters are the stars, if you will, if we're going to use a media thing, which I don't really like to do, but they're the protagonists, whether they win or lose, rise or fall, whatever, but it's their stories that they're making. Think dangerous. Everything in the world is a target. You're thinking like an evil overlord. No single life is worth anything, and there is nothing sacrosanct. Everything can be put in danger. Everything can be destroyed. Nothing you create is ever protected. Whenever your eye falls on something you've created, think how it can be put in danger, fall apart, or crumble. The world changes. Without the character's intervention, it changes for the worse. And I agree with this one too. Nothing should be precious. You got something, think about what could you put it in danger. And I think sometimes as GMs, we do get stuck, not in a trap, but maybe it's a trap of not wanting to, you're making things that become like, I think too precious, maybe the best way to think of that. We don't want to have touched. It's got to remain a certain way. And I think all that does is it makes the world more static, right? The game should be about putting everything on the line kind of thing, tensions. All right, begin and end with the fiction. Everything you and the players do in Dungeon World comes from and leads to fictional events. When the players make a move, they take a fictional action to trigger it, apply the rules, and get a fictional effect. When you make a move, it always comes from the fiction. Yeah, I think that's solid. The fiction begin and end, right? I think I would agree with that. I don't think there's anything to disagree with. Think off screen too. Just because you're a fan of the characters doesn't mean everything happens right in front of them. Sometimes your best move is in the next room or another part of the dungeon or even back in town. Make your move elsewhere and show its effects when they come into the spotlight. So I'm just thinking, right, you don't have to, again, not again, but there can be a consequence of an action that doesn't happen right there. It can be somewhere else. So you don't have to always be what's happening in the moment. You can broaden that. Now, I think, and this sometimes where it can get a little bit, depending on, I don't know, not even really, sometimes you hear different things, but it still should be the fiction. In other words, whatever the party's doing in this moment has to find a way out there. So if the wizard or say druid calls a thunderstorm where you are, that can have rippling effects. People might see it from miles away, could see the thunder clouds. Maybe even there's some consequence that, well, because you did something here, you had to pull that weather from somewhere else. So now some farm is in drought. And maybe they know because they see all the clouds zooming into the spot that someone did some crappy weather magic over there, right? But it's got to make sense. I don't think things should be unless the way your game works, where it's just you're on one side of the world doing something, and then somebody on the other side is all of a sudden like, well, this thing's been done. We must act. But it could be, depending on what it is. But, think about things outside the moment, because sometimes that's the best thing. The party does something, they're seen, they're heard, but it's not guards on them right away. It's now word trickles back to somebody. Maybe it's a good guy. Maybe it was someone who would have been a good guy, but now it's a bad guy. Maybe it's a bad guy. And then that information will come back. The fact that the party did this thing will come back to bite them, but not right here, not right now, which I also like because it gives things a chance to percolate, which I'm always a fan of. Okay, so that is it. That is the Dungeon World advice. And I don't think, I'm sure someone will find something not to like, but I don't think there's anything in here that I would even call it controversial from this in terms of forgetting playing Dungeon World, just playing any game. I think this is just really good advice. You can swap out move for meta or mechanics, right? You shouldn't speak mechanics out loud. Mechanics should follow the fiction, all that stuff. I feel like it's pretty solid. And I don't think it's something that you would look at. And if I just, again, taking away the Dungeon World trappings so that, this is from PBTA, if you just plunk this on somebody's blog and called it the Blorb Principles, I think people would be like, oh, this is good stuff, right? Brian says, this advice is so agreeable, it almost goes in one ear and out the other. Well, I don't know about that. Maybe it does. That's not its fault. Let's move on now to Blorb Principles. I pinned the Blorb Principles link, which I didn't put in the show notes. And I'm going to open up another not Spindrift flavored tonic. Sound of a soda can opening up. Now we're on to the Blorb. Blorb Principles. Never prep plot. Blorb is a prep-focused playstyle, and prep is central, but never prep plot. Do prep entities, places, enemies, friends, items, rewards. Port monstre trésor. What happens should be emergent, not pre-written. Events should be things that might happen from mechanics, dice rolls, etc. Not always will happen, or worse, that the DM could choose to have it happen. So, right, this is very kind of standard, classic, kind of OSR-ish principle so far. All right, you prep stuff, you don't prep plot. No paper after seeing rock. When you play paper, scissors, stone, it's obviously cheating to act a little bit slowly and select paper after seeing rock. Both people need to select simultaneously. If you secretly write down your selection in advance, you don't have to be as precise with the timing. Your selection is committed long before you saw that rock. Even to the point that it's enough for one person to write down their selection as long as they write it down before the other person announces their selection. Blorb is based on this. That's why you need to write, this room has 3d6 skeletons before the player characters go there. No quantum keeps. You've got to let them make real choices. So this is this idea of just adding or removing stuff based on a whim. Well, the party's cutting through this quick, so I'm going to add some things in there. And I think, he would be saying, well, no, that's cheating, right? These are the people who are in this dungeon, so that's the people in the dungeon. And if the party's cutting through them like butter, well, then the party's cutting through them like butter. And I think that's good. And I think that's good advice. I would say if you're playing it's, I would throw maybe a caveat in there. Not that they would have to, but the caveat for me would be if you're playing a one shot, like a con game, I think it's okay to be a little bit more free. I would still want to avoid the quantum stuff. So if they're at a door, I wouldn't just throw skeletons on the other side, because I didn't have a chance to set up the fact that there were skeletons in the room. But what I might do is add more skeletons to a room already had skeletons in it. If maybe I have more people than I thought I would have, or than the written material has, or if, oh my gosh, they are super good, so I gotta, right. I mean, I think there's some room to play around there, but I think the principle would be is if there was nothing there before, there shouldn't be something in there because it's convenient to be in there. Put the things where you think the things should be, and run with what you've got. 3 tiers of truth. The DM asked a question like, for example, what's in the office? A, look in the prep. Maybe this room is in there, and the text says what is canonically in there, and you're all set. B, otherwise, you may have a rule. Default offices have a stapler, a typewriter, a visitor's chair, etc. Or a mechanic, such as a random room content table. Use that. C, if you don't have that either, make something up. Try to make it something that won't help or harm the player characters too much. It can be evocative and build mood, but shouldn't be 20 angry beholders or 20 free healing potions. Don't feel bad. Allowing GMs to start small is how we get new GMs, but patch the hole, or this category of holes, for future sessions. And over time, your DMing will get more and more solid. Always work in that order, top to bottom, only falling to a lower tier of truth when you have to. Campaign that's built all on T2 and T3 truths isn't as engaging as one that has some solid T1 framework in there. In a cloud, bones of steel. But as you patch holes, as T3 instructs you to do, feel free to patch them with mechanics and general solutions, i.e. T2 truths. That's you building a DM's toolbox. I'm not sure why he calls them T1, T2, T3, but he labels them A, B, and C. So basically, T1 is having it prepped. T2 is using rules and mechanics. T3 is improvise. So that's right. And basically, if you're only using random mechanics or sort of mechanical generation, which is usually some kind of random, but I suppose it doesn't have to be, and improv, it's probably not as good as if you had a chance to do it in advance, which I think most people would agree with. Now, I've been in some sessions that were amazing, that were mostly freewheeling improv, and I think I've run some, I feel like, that have been good and were very much improv, but I wouldn't want to do that all the time. And I think that would be the same thing, right? Yeah, you can do that sometimes. And maybe if you're great, you can do it all the time. That might work for you. But I think for the most part, for the average Joe GM referee, you probably want to prep stuff out. And I think that's a good order of operations, which is kind of your standard order of operations anyway. Hey, what if I have prepped? Well, if I don't have it prepped, maybe I got a table that does it. If I don't have a table, I got to make something up. And kind of like the rulings turning into rules part is you start making things up. You should be writing that down. I think that's what he means by patching the hole. You're writing it down. You're doing something. Maybe you turn it into a table. Maybe then you take that and you start putting that into you start looking at your prep and you're like, oh, they're really interested in all these things. So now I'll add that into my prep so that next time I won't have to do these other steps. I'll be able to have it prepped in advance. Oh, let's see. Something's going on in chat. Let's see. Strict adherence to this one, which I think Brian is referring to, no paper after seeing rock. Doesn't help if the text is translating to a bad time. Sometimes it goes like that, and the DM is there to mitigate crappy play sessions, I think. Yeah, this is where it gets tricky, right? Mitigating crappy play sessions. I think it's a little bit of, I think it really just falls back to everybody, but everybody at the table should be trying to make play as the least amount of crappy and the most amount of yay as possible. It kind of is like, well, where is the crappy part coming from, right? If it's assuming it's not coming from player interactions with each other, people were not getting along, people having bad days, something like that, right? If it's coming from the material, then as the referee, you could make the call that like, okay, I gotta change this up because this is not fun. Maybe this is something I bought, or maybe it's something I made myself that I thought would be a lot of fun and it ain't working. So I got to do that. Now, whether you think that you're strong enough with your improv and whatever to take whatever you have and kind of, to take a good part of it and crumple it up and throw it away and just riff off of it or do differently. Yeah, you maybe can. Maybe it would be better off just cutting that dungeon short or doing something else, which I suppose maybe falls in the same department. I don't know. But I will say this. I think sometimes, one, as a referee, as the GM, you don't always know what people are enjoying or not. And I think you can jump the gun, and something could be really hard. You might be looking at a situation like, man, the players are really struggling mightily to do this thing, but they're actually enjoying doing the thing. And then if you then take the thing away, you think like, oh, I'm going to do this because they're obviously blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's not what the reality was. And I think we often don't see that reality. So I would be careful when you do that. And I think sometimes GMs actually do themselves and their games a disservice when they jump too quick to trying to change it. When maybe the best thing is, hey, you know what? I'm just going to let this run its course and we'll see what happens. And if it isn't, if it isn't, again, player on player, we hate each other now, whatever it's the adventure, then there's probably some, maybe I can play an NPC differently or whatever. But I think sometimes you really got to be careful because you can go to actually going on the wrong path unknowingly. Sometimes the road to hell is filled with good intentions kind of thing. Croco says, what if you keep most of your prep in your head? Well, I think they would say write it down. And I would say write it down too. Because, I don't know, unless you've got that, what is that, like some kind of stone cold, ironclad memory, you're going to forget stuff. And sometimes you forget really good ideas. Sometimes ideas you think are really good, when you write them down, you'll suddenly see and say, oh, maybe that's not so good. Write it down. Take a minute, write it down. Or you can use something like use your phone, voice record. Use, the memo thing and say, Siri or whatever, write this down, or just record it. Do something to write down what you're doing. I'll find on the subway, if I get a great idea, I'll open up my notes app and I'll just tap out some stuff. Get it on paper because otherwise it will vanish when you least expect it. Croco also says, important to ask the players what they want to do next session and hold them to that. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a little bit of a different thing to what they're talking about here. But yes, I think that one of the things that I think GMs don't do enough of is, ask your players about what their characters are going to do in the next session or whatever. It's people get into like, how will I know what the players are going to do? It's like, because you ask them. Just ask them. They're there. They're sitting there. Use your Discord. Just at the end of the game, hey, where are you guys going next time, so I can prepare for the next. Just ask them, and they can still change. I mean, I used to tell in my Discord game, I would say, listen, you guys could change your mind, but just tell me where you think you want to go, so that I can kind of have an idea of what's going on and all that. If you guys end up changing your mind, that's probably going to be fine. But give me an idea. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like the GMs don't want to ask, like, oh, I can't possibly ask that. Why? Just ask them. It's fine. It will be fine. Croco says, I think this article is mostly for stuff you make yourself. It might be off on that. I don't know. Maybe. Probably. But, I mean, saying look in the prep doesn't mean that you wrote the prep. Could be something written. But it doesn't really matter, I don't think. Croc also says, in theory, if you use pre-written material, you can filter out stuff you don't think will work at your table. I mean, I think that would be part of your prep. I mean, you should always take whatever material and do with it whatever the heck you like. There's no rule that says if you take B2, keep on the Borderlands, you have to go down a particular pathway. I think it's harder to do that during a session because like I said before, I think you can take it the wrong way. I think sometimes you can say like, yeah, the party's struggling here, but the player's actually enjoying the struggle versus they're not. And sometimes it's easy to misread because I think you're always looking for those cues like, am I doing well? Are they having fun? And sometimes sessions are fun, or fun might even be the wrong word. They're engaging and they're interesting. And even though you might not be having fun, and like we're not all going, yay, but it's a really, what's the word I want? It's a really satisfying session. It doesn't have to be all laughs all the time. And you can mistake that for being frustrated with the game. So I think just the thing is you can just jump too fast. But if you know that if your party's going into a certain adventure, and I would say, like I would buy, if I'm picking an adventure to downloading or buying it or whatever, like I would want to look at, well, who am I running this for before I buy it? But if I got it, and maybe I thought it was one way, and maybe it is the way I want, but it's got some element that I know my party's not going to go for, sure, edit, do it. But I probably would prep that rather than just doing it play, because you can just run into inconsistencies. Like if there's an NPC that you're removing, what if you forget to remove them from one spot and suddenly you speak their name and the party's like, and you're like, oh, I didn't want to do, or some other element, right? So you just want to. That's where that prep stuff comes in hand. Brian says, you'll forget things you wrote down too, but far less than you would if you didn't. Yes, and Brian, the fact that you've written it down means you should be able to check that writing, and so you can get it back again. That's the nice thing about writing it down, is you can read what you have written. Brian says, maybe some DMs get caught up with advice of when to hide things for the players to provide immersion as direct communication to players about logistics of play. I mean, maybe, but that in terms of that, like, where do you want to go? It's not even a breaking emergence. Like, we're ending this session. So I guess maybe that's emergent breaking. And then you're saying where your player is going to do when we pick this up next week. I don't know, because you're already ending the session. So I don't know if we're worried about immersion when we're closing up our notebooks and putting our dice away and packing our bags. I don't know. But yeah, it's kind of, what is it? It's like cutting off your nose to spite your face, I think. Croco says, a tricky balance, that one. I usually err on the side of clarity, but it's hard to tell how clear you actually are as a TM. That's another thing, right? That's why a lot of times be more obvious. If you think you're being obvious, be more obvious. Because, yeah, it is easy to, because you know everything, it's easy to forget it's hard to put yourself in the player standpoint who know nothing. All right, wallpaper salience. Things with points and sharp ends are extra important to have prepped. It's okay to improvise things on the flavor layer, like names, wallpaper, colors, etc. This is why you see so much OSR stuff that's just a terse list of enemies and they're HD pretty much. That's the least improvisable part. When I place a bandit captain in the prep, I make sure that her stat block or a reference to it is listed. If I have a good idea for her name, her clothes, some traits, that's all fine to write down, but the stats need to be carved into granite first thing. And this is getting back to that no cheating clause, right? I'm going to put the bandit captain, I'm going to stat her up with her level, and I'm going to play her to that level. If the PCs roll up and they're just have overwhelming force, then so be it. The bandit captain's going to figure it out or die trying or whatever. On the same token, if the party comes unprepared or underpowered or some other thing, then the shoe's on the other foot. But I'm not going to cheat it. If she's level 6, I want her to be level 6. She's level 6. I'm not going to start moving the dial up and down in the middle of the session. Hey, Jason. Okay, now let's see. Now let's say they find a potion that lets them teleport through green walls. All of a sudden, you are going to need a wallpaper color table for rooms where your prep doesn't already say what color the wallpaper is. But until they have such a potion, this is an area where you can have some slack in your prep. A game where all the wallpaper is improvised isn't going to be satisfyingly blorby. Again, some bones of steel are necessary in that cloud of description. So prep at least some wallpaper level stuff if you can, but you don't need much. So there's a couple things going on here, right? The idea with the wallpaper is that you don't, I think one of the good things is to take away is, hey, if my party's not in that, I don't need to worry about that right now, right? If you're in a Zelda dungeon, they'd have in all the old, I think in all the Zeldas, but definitely in the old ones, there'd be dungeons and you'd have to get the tool, right? And the tool would help you get through. So there's the dungeon where you get the bombs and you look for the cracks, the wall with the cracks, so you can do the bombs, right? But just assuming that in another dungeon, if we were doing the same Zelda, the role-playing game, in the first dungeon that you show up in, that they don't have bombs. So you don't have to worry about marking walls with the cracks with the bombs on it. Now, if they leave and they find and they get the bomb thing, now in future dungeons, and maybe even if they ever go back to that first dungeon, you might need to backfill it in. Now you're going to need to worry about that detail. But you don't need to put all those details in until there's something to worry about. So don't have to worry about which walls are bombable until they have bombs. By the same token, some of those details are nice, and you probably should work some of them in, but you don't have to do everything, right? So you kind of want to think about what's most important, and then maybe put like pepper and salt, like a little seasoning. You can kind of season with some of the finer details. Brian says, so things don't matter until they do. God, well, yeah, at least on a small level, but I suppose you could really apply to everything. Yeah, things don't matter until they do. But again, you want to have those details, like describing individuals and things like that, kind of thing, right? But for some of the other things, you don't have to worry about everything. And kind of on top of that, let context be your guide. If you know that color walls are important because you've got a color wall potion spell, then yeah, you want to figure that out, and you want to do it in advance. Again, part of that fairness. I'm gonna put colored walls everywhere, and some of them are gonna be green, but I'm gonna do it in advance so that I'm not favoring or disfavoring that wizard with their, or whoever's got the green wall potion. Brian says you can't backfill though because it didn't exist in the first place. No, it's I think it's more that you didn't have the bombs, so you weren't looking for the cracks in the walls, or you didn't see them, but that didn't mean they weren't there. When you come back, like the wallpaper thing, you didn't notice what the wallpaper was because it wasn't important. Now you're looking for specific wallpaper. Now it's important. I wouldn't. Yes, in a sense, it didn't exist, but I think from a fictional standpoint, it did. You just didn't notice it yet. You didn't notice it because it didn't mean anything to you. So yeah, there were cracks in the walls, but you didn't have anything to take advantage of the cracks. So you just kind of like, the cracks in the walls. Now you're going back looking for the cracks in the walls, is how I would kind of position it. Kroga says, what if you have things like, quote, chance to teleport to a different plane? How much do you need a fictional prep for that different plane? I mean, as much as you need to run it on the chance they're going to take it. So I probably wouldn't introduce chance to go to a different plane if I didn't have at least one different plane. And I probably would say, like, okay, well, let's say I have a Feywild, right, or a fairy land. Then maybe until I have something else, I probably would just chance to teleport to Fairyland or something. So I mean, I think this is why you have to be careful about the things you put in your game, because they have these repercussions. And then if you do something like, oh, different plane, and then you start thinking about, well, there's this plane, this plane, this plane, roll your die to see where you end up, and none of that stuff is prepped at all. I mean, yeah, you could still run it. Like I think I could run a game and I was like, oh, you're in the ethereal plane now. I could probably, kind of run with my vague notions what the ethereal plane would be, but I'd be better if I prepped it. Or you end up in, I don't know where, So, be careful. Again, be careful about what stuff you throw in your game, because you don't know what those repercussions are going to be precisely until you get there. Okay, salience, time, zoom. Time passes at the speed necessary for us participants, players, and DM to answer the questions that arise in play. I cast Detect Magic as a ritual. What do I find? I look in the desk drawer. What's there? We leave the village and head towards the nearest big city. What happens? This isn't quote-unquote cutting. I don't like movie metaphors, but it's fast forwarding or slowing down as needed. The DM shouldn't try to pace the game dramatically. Just keep the Q&A mindset when it comes to time. If they say we wait for someone to arrive, ask them how long they would be willing to wait, so you know how many encounter checks, rations, etc. to charge. I think that's fine. I don't know if anyone's going to be arguing with that at all. Brian says there's the unspoken of other method of DMing where you keep adding and adding things until it all collapses, and then you start a new campaign. What is that? What is the other? Isn't that all? I feel like that's everything. You're always adding and adding. I don't know if there's any kind of subtractive DMing technique, Brian. So I don't know why you say it's the other. It is the one. It is the one thing. Nobody preps subtractively. You're always adding and adding until things fall apart. If you even get that far. If things fall apart because the size of your campaign, that's amazing. Things usually fall apart far before you reach that point. Prepping is different from running. A good prepper might think of things like theme, fairness, balance, things being evocative, etc. But once you start running, all those thoughts need to go out the window. A prepper might think long and hard how many wolves are appropriate in the forest for a good and fun gameplay experience, or a nice, interesting, exploratory, simmy experience. But once you're running, you're committed. You can't go around changing that stuff. Things can happen in the game that are too boring, too unbalanced, too easy, too hard, but that's going to have to be okay. Blorb isn't primarily gamist. It's not balanced enough for that. Some regions are way too easy and some are way too hard, but it is well suited to gamism in some ways. The game is the players versus the module, whether that's homebrew or not. The DM is the referee, not the opponent. The maker of the module needs to have a completely different mindset than the runner of the module. It's similar to puzzle makers. It's easy to make an unsolvable puzzle. Here's one. All right, that's fine. I'm skipping over reading off this unsolvable puzzle. That's no fun. The idea for a puzzle maker is to make one that's the sweet spot between too hard and too easy to be a challenge. That's kind of the sweet spot for a module writer too. Not necessarily challenge-based, but interesting, meaningful, lots of toys to play with. In the board game Zendo, once you've selected a rule and started adjudicating it, you are not allowed to change that rule until the round is over. Newer editions of Zendo have you mark your rule on a hidden card instead of keeping it in your head to safeguard against a game-breaking cheat. So basically, once you write it down, go with it, which I actually think is a good rule in general. I'm not saying there are never reasons to want to shift something around, and I think lots of GMs will, for good reasons and to good effect, will shift things around. But for the most part, I think generally speaking, run what you got. And there's, what is this phrase, like you dance with who you brung to the ball or something, like, you prep this, you thought it was good, just run it, because you never know. You never know what it is. Now, I mean, some people are like, oh my gosh, when I TPK'd the party, I didn't, like, well, they have a hand. I think TPKs, unless you're dropping them into situations they can't possibly escape from, and then doing it, like, there's always a choice of the party to be like, nope, we're going to keep plowing forward when good sense says we should turn and get the heck out of Dodge, but we're hanging in there. There's a lot of things like that going on. So I do agree, generally speaking, with, yeah, man, I'm gonna go with it. I'm gonna go with it, and I can, if it's a module, like if you're running a game at a con or a one shot, and you're like, man, they got through it too fast. All right, next time I'm gonna do this stuff. Oh, it was too slow. Maybe next time I'll try to speed them up. But maybe doing that while you're running the game, it's very difficult. It can be very difficult. Okay. Diegetical mechanics. Having a Blorby committed prep allows you to use, let's call it diegetical mechanics. Symbolic mechanics are the mechanics we all know and love, like roll 15 or higher on a d20. You get 40 XP, etc. Diegetic mechanics are things that are all about the character action in the game world. The DM has access to notes that say things like, if they pull the left lever, there will be cake. If they pull the right lever, they will die. Annie does not want to talk about Sarah. The cursed figurine is hidden under the t-shirts in the bedroom drawer. I'm not slagging games like Spirit of the Century that were made to be more pickup, and you don't have to prep them, because instead of the DM having written down where the figurine is, the players can make rolls to see if their character finds the figurine or not. That's all fine for them. This is Blorb. We have the Glorical, a glorious oracle of dice and prep, and thanks to the 3 tiers of truth principle and the wallpaper salience principle, we can easily sketch out a rich game world to explore. Modules and stuff really help too. With the Glorical, we can resolve these situations by talking it out, by having the player say, I tie a rope around the right lever, but make sure to keep it slack until I'm outside the room. Annie, how are you feeling? Do you want some water? I'm in the living room trying to measure out the bookcase. Does the depth of it seem to match up with the wall? In the 90s, and especially throughout the aughts and the 10s, there was this trend turning things that easily could have been diegetical mechanics into symbolic mechanics, like the scratch one use of adventuring gear mechanics in Dungeon World. Dum dum. I didn't even realize they mentioned Dungeon World in here. Or the usage dice in the Black Hack. I'm not on board with that trend. Not every genre is about meticulous inventory. You can run an office romantic drama without knowing exactly how many staplers are on every desk. But for situations when gear is important, it's one of the few moments where what the player should be caring about matches with what the character should be caring about. The same is generally true for diegetical mechanics. You get transported to the game world. How many torches do I have left? What are these weird levers on the wall? What's this girl's deal? And is she hiding something? Where would I hide it? A figurine if it were me. You get to be there, if only for a few moments, instead of pushing distant and numb press skill marked A buttons from 1,000 feet away. No, I don't really disagree with that either. I think we all aspire to staying in the fiction, right? It's very similar to the Dungeon Worlds, like don't talk about your moves, right? Go from the fiction. It's pretty much saying the same thing. Don't rely on meta or mechanical concepts. Like, what is the fiction saying? What are you doing in the fiction? And then we can figure out if we need to have a mechanic to do that. And the funny thing here, they talk about like, well, I don't, and it's, obviously there's a lot going on in Dungeon World besides these GM advice, but I think you could pair up these advice together. And I don't know that they're saying too much differently, which was kind of the idea between reading these, is they're coming from different sides of it, talking about playing the same game in spirit, though, and I don't know what kind of game the Blorb is. This is all I know about the Blorb. I don't know what kind of mechanics it uses. I don't know if it's based on anything. I don't know if it's like a BX clone or if it's a totally different thing. I have no idea. Just that it's kind of OSR, right? So yeah, these OSR side and the story game side, talking about the same genre of games. We're not doing apples to oranges, and they all kind of come together, and you get some like, oh, they're kind of saying the same sort of thing. Now they might go about it in very different ways, and I think on the PBTA side, you're probably more comfortable with what Blorb is calling the T2 and T3 mechanics. And that's, and maybe I would say, if we're going to look at it and using these as kind of exemplars, they're straw men, but they're fine for now. And saying, okay, well, what separates kind of Blorby play from Dungeon Worldy play? I would say it's probably on those, how heavily you're relying on the tiers of truth, because they all pretty much go through the same things, right? But maybe one is more comfortable with that second and third level of truth, and is a little bit more freewheeling with that. Whereas on the Blorby side, it's a little bit stricter with that. But they're generally talking about the same things, which I thought was why it made it kind of a fun. Well, I don't know, fun for me. I don't know if it was fun for you guys, but a fun look, because just reading these, if you just read these by themselves, not seeing anything else, you would probably not imagine these games are very different. You might think, well, they're both OSR games, or maybe you would think these are both Powered by the Apocalypse kind of story games. I mean, you might think the Blorb is a little bit more wears it on its sleeve, whereas I think the Dungeon World, other than if you took away the references to Powered by the Apocalypse terms, like it would mostly just moves. So if you just did a quick edit job to sort of make them both generic, I don't think you would see that much difference. So it kind of makes me wonder, well, are the differences that sometimes we think about as being so vast between these approaches of like the story game, Powered by the Apocalypse like approach, and the OSR approach? You get people will post something in the OSR Reddit or somewhere, and you get people shouting them down. No, that's Powered by the Apocalypse. It doesn't belong here. Like, well, I don't know. That Demon Vice, I feel like, belongs just fine here. And I think a lot of people could read the Blorby thing, and maybe they might think it's a little bit strict, but otherwise, I think like, yeah, that would be. It's nothing that you would look at and say, oh my gosh, here it is. Here is the thing that I cannot abide by. In fact, if anything, I'm probably a little bit more ambivalent towards some of the Blorbisms, at least the strictness of it, than I am with the Dungeon World advice. I don't know. I think that's mostly because, and I've talked about this before, is I think we come from this place with OSR games where people have prepped tons. There's tons of prep. But in my history, and I don't know everybody else from when they started playing, there were lots of times when we played and we had very minimal material. Sometimes we might be out at a movie or something, and we just say, hey, you want to go to someone's, so let's go back to his house and we'll game. And I got an idea to run something, and you don't have anything. So you look at the 3 tiers of truth, and you're saying, well, all I have is B and C because I don't have a module, and this is pre-internet, or at least pre-modern internet. We had access to everything, all kinds of free material. So it's like, well, I don't have, or we don't have time. Even if it was like, oh, I'm going to go home. Like, no, we're just playing something. And I feel like sometimes some of the story gamey type stuff does fill in those blanks there that I recall using when I was playing at different times when I didn't have a ton of time to prep, or I didn't having bought a module. And I think sometimes the strictness they see in the OSR side doesn't really help with that part of it. When you have to improv, it put all kinds of limitations on what you can improv. No, don't improv this. Don't stupid fly or gnat or something. But they don't really help you. It's like, well, that's all I got. All I've got is they enter a town I didn't think they were going to be in. It was on the map. They decided to go east when I thought I'd prepped everything west, and now they're in this town, and I got nothing for this town. So now not only in the town, but they're trying to break into some guy's house. So I need to do something. So I don't have access to any tier 1 truths. I don't even have much access to any tier 2 truths. So I just got to go with T3. So what are some tools to help me with T3? And often I think that's where the OSR thing kind of falls apart. Unless you've got that book in front of you that's got 100 tables in it you can find and roll, but that's going to grind your game down to a halt. It's like, I got maybe this other stuff could be helpful to you. I don't know, but it was just fun. I thought it was a good exercise to look at these 2 sides of the same coin, perhaps, like they used like to say all the time in the movies. We're like 2 sides of the same coin, you and I. The same. I'm not like you. Whatever. Oh, let's see, before I head off here, Brian says, reminds me of a scenario I ran up. A few bars characters hired to perform, bard. A bard. Bard characters hired to perform at a halfling mob boss's daughter's birthday, and then fought off a group of rival mooks who leapt out of the birthday cake. Nice. Can't trust cakes of certain size, Crocker says. That's true. The halfling factor made it a little less conspicuous, but yeah, Trojan cakes are no good. Oh yeah, no, they are the best, but only for the GM to unleash upon the party. Though I'd love to see if there's a party plan to sneak into a stronghold by hiding inside a giant cake. That'd be good. All right, folks. Like I said before, I'm sorry I didn't get enough video kind of stream content up. Not what I thought I would accomplish here, but I got a lot of other good stuff done. I'll just show it in big before I leave, because why not? Woo! So here's my booklet I printed out yesterday. Sorry that the pages are not well cut, but look at that. Oh, nice. I even did it in slight color. I love this guy. I'm gonna make a shirt or something with that guy on it, because he's great. So I'm working on this. I'm gonna have some stuff. I'm not quite ready yet. I'm not there yet, but that's kind of what I was doing, trying to get this all finished up. Why am I so dark all of a sudden? Hold on a minute. I don't know why I'm so dark. Hello, light. You don't see me? Anyway, that's all right. It's the end of the stream. Any whoozy watsy. So yeah, I'll have these. I'm still working on the referees book, and I'm gonna probably do some different versions. Like, keep going back and forth on how much I feel like someone to have just as kind of a light reference versus more of a full thing. But this has kind of got everything in it, in a readable way. And then the refs one's coming, and then some kind of setting booklet to get folks started on. And then I think for the foreseeable future, when I'm doing like hex crawly stuff or making hex maps and stuff, I'm pretty much going to be referencing this as my sort of basic rule set, which it's pretty much compatible with other stuff because it uses HD and things, and you just kind of you can add a few things if you need to. But I've entered the dark web. Anywho, oh yeah, well, visibly, I don't know, I've cranked up the light. It doesn't seem to be helping me too much. In any event, have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you're watching, listening to this. I will be back at Studio A. I'm picking up my daughter from camp this afternoon, then heading back to the city. So yeah, that's that. And that's all I got, folks. So game on, everybody. I'll talk to you later. Bye now.